joint meeting between the Finance Committee and Select Board. This evening's agenda, we kick off our annual department head budget meetings. We have several department heads coming before us tonight, as well as the 25th next week, and then again on Saturday, I believe. I think it's the first Saturday of February, to finish it up, and hopefully from there we'll get consensus and get a balanced budget. So we have, like I had mentioned, several department head meetings tonight to discuss their budgets. We will potentially vote on a reserve fund transfer for some work that needs to be done at the Magog Orchard. Do you have any public input, any member updates? And I believe we do have some meeting minutes from our previous meeting we can approve, and then we will adjourn. So without that, I'd like to get right into the agenda with, I believe our first up is Diane Rory with the clerk elections town meeting reports. Good evening.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So basically, my budget is pretty simple, straightforward. We do have a few increases this year, based on we are in even year of the town clerks, town elections. Based this year, we have 3 elections, which increases the election dollars. We've increased it up to $9,300. Usually we go up to about $12,000. We're hoping to keep it around $9,300. The reason we stayed at $9,300 was found that we've gone up to $12,000 in previous years. We've found that we've been able to keep it around $9,300. We've looked at the actual dollars that we've spent in the past. And based on what we've usually gotten back from the state, it's pretty much kept it brought it back down to about the $9,300. So we've gone pretty conservative this year at the $9,300. So that's why you've seen the jump, but it's because of the elections that we've had. So we have 2 state elections this year, one in September and then one in November. So again, the following year is May, so it all falls on that. The other increases that you're seeing is we did increase line item 510020. We increased that from 3,000 to 4,000 because that's an actual figure that we will have based on the additional 2 elections as well. That is for the assistant town clerk based on overtime hours that she was putting in for those 2 extra elections. Most of the other line items are staying the same. We did increase a little bit for office supplies. Other than that, it stayed pretty much the same. We did increase a little bit on the other services, but that's based on what we're assuming will be going towards modification.
Questions from any of the board?
No.
Matthew or Paul, any questions?
Nope.
We have, let's see, I see Alvin.
Alvin just coming in.
Sure. Okay. I'm expecting Mr. Champion as well to be pretty soon. Really, no questions besides some of the. I know a lot of the changes with some of the Voting Rights Act and things like that. That you see anything on the horizon?
Well, I mean, the problem is that it's mandated but not funded, and so it's you know, it's, the early voting happens and it falls on the town.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they tell us that we have to have, you know, the 10 days of early voting, but it falls on the town. So they want you to do more than what you offer, but if you're not going to give us anything back from the state side, you know, where's the incentive for us to do anything more than the business hours? I understand that the residents want more. You know, we do have to do that one Saturday, but, you know, it's hard for us to be able to offer anything more than the business hours if we can't afford to be offering more than the business hours in that one Saturday. So if you're mandating something, it's about time that the state stepped up and gave us something back.
I don't think, I haven't seen any.
There's nothing that they're gonna, right now, they don't have the money.
Yeah.
It all falls back on.
I know we rely heavily on volunteers as well, but it
Right.
still requires your staff in some form of fashion.
Yeah, so this town is very fortunate with all of the volunteers that we still have. A lot of cities and towns are losing that. We've been very fortunate that we still do have volunteers. But many cities and towns are losing out on that, but we are still very fortunate that we have volunteers who still help out during the early voting and every day for our election. I think we're gonna, in the near future, we're gonna be having to look at having to pay. And minimum wage is gonna do it. So.
Well, I think, you know, your constituency, the different select board members, I don't know if you've heard any, not complaints, but issues with voting, or if we have, are we open enough for the voting? Do we have enough time dedicated towards voting opportunities? That's probably the one thing, obviously, that we'd be concerned with is people that are coming to you or whoever saying we don't have enough hours to vote.
Well, the early voting, the first year that we did the early voting, we literally stayed open till 6 o'clock every night. And no matter what you do, it's never going to be enough. How many hours you stay open. We opened at 7 a.m. every day, and we were staying open till 6 o'clock every night. You know, and I talked to, you know, all of the other town clerks, and they were like, well, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Well, because we were offering it to our residents to make it easier for them to vote. And, you know, they were like, well, you know, the mandate says you have to be open during business hours. And a lot of them were not doing it because they were not finding that it was beneficial to them. Because the more that you stay open, the more, you know, it's really not benefiting the town clerk's offices. It is good for the residents, but you're finding that it's fewer people that are coming out every day to vote. You know, you're not finding the big numbers. In a city or town, the big cities, Boston, sure, they're having lines and lines and lines and lines of people waiting. We're never seeing lines waiting. So what we're offering, I think, does the job. So.
Mr. Chairman, if I can interject. The fact is that even with all the extra hours that you offered, the numbers of voters was the same people that were voting. They were just voting in a different time.
That's correct.
Versus voting through the 12 hours if the polls are open on election day.
Correct.
It's still the same people that are voting. So you either kind of jump through hoops to try to create opportunities. It's almost like maybe an appointment, by appointment only or something like that. That way you can schedule it better and it's not incumbent upon you to have folks, whether it be your staff, you and your assistant, or you and volunteers. I think that I kind of take the lead of other communities who are staying open during the hours of operation, the normal hours of operation, versus putting an additional strain on you and your assistant and any volunteers. Right? I feel as though unless we're going to put additional funds into your budget, I would rather not strain you and your staff. There's additional strains on you to take the census and with the increase in postage, and things like that. You do a great job of making sure we're staying around this 97 or 98% that you get the returns from the census. Hats off, it's a fantastic job. But there's enough strains and unfunded mandates that are placed upon you by the state that if they're saying that all you need to do is the normal hours of operation, that's what I would prefer as a resident.
Yeah.
Forget about my student force or the select board. I just feel as though less strain on you and those that work for you would be, I think, more productive, especially since we're not seeing the difference in voter turnout.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, once again, it's maximizing the vote, that's what we're after, so.
Right.
If you've seen since we've started this, that has been that long,
Right.
so we're pretty much consistent with the numbers aren't going up, and we just really need to look at, I'm not gonna at all get involved, tell you about it. You've obviously got it down, you're above and beyond, so. But just, the question was really geared towards, with the mandate, are we expecting more hours to come from this? But you said probably not without funding.
Right.
Which makes a lot of sense. Any other?
Yeah, just one other quick question, I guess. So on the assistant time clerk wages, so the mayor mentioned increasing hours to 40 hours, so that covers that as well.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
was that was the.
Is that 40
hours
now?
mentioned.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And we've talked in the past about the voting machines and
Yep.
what you're doing to keep those alive.
Yep, so a lot of the other town clerks are switching to newer machines and changing the what they have, and the machines that we have are working great for Littleton. You know, the numbers that we have are working well, and so a lot of them are turning their machines in. And so in order for us to really make it worthwhile for us, we're actually buying machines that are being turned in because they're not really not working. They're working great. So what's happening is I'm putting my name in to grab those machines and having backups with those machines. And until the state mandates that we have to buy these new machines that are costing $20,000 a machine, we're using the machines and they're refurbishing them and they're selling them to us for $800.
Fraction of the original ones.
Right. So instead of paying $20,000 per machine, for 4 machines, we're getting, other machines that are backing us up for $800. So that's what we're doing right now to keep us, operational with the elections, and it's working fine. As well, we were looking to possibly having to buy new booths, and we just saved ourselves between $12,000 and $15,000 because the town clerk was buying herself all new booths. And she said, you can have it. So this year we're going to have to save quite a bit.
Thank you for that.
Never heard any complaints about our roofs or our machines, so I'm assuming those are much larger communities. So maybe there's a newer digital type thing.
Right. Yeah, and I looked into them, and if it, as my father always said, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So,
The AccuVote is the machine that we use now.
yeah,
And those are, just AccuVote still supporting them?
yeah,
Still manufacturing machines,
Ellie,
but they're
yes,
still supporting the machines that we have. Okay, great. Let's use that. Thank you, guys.
yeah.
Let's keep going.
Any other questions?
One other thing I have here is, I saw how busy Diane's office got during the last presidential election.
Yes.
So I just want to put it out there for this group to understand it's probably the next presidential election. I would imagine that she would need help in her office. They were crazy this past election, but early voting, absentee voting, and the regular voting, it was bonkers. So I think and talk to Diane and have her push this through. Next 2 years from now, presidential election, gonna do for part-time.
Yeah, either through the, obviously the senior tax program, write-off program, or other, or internships. But outside of that, you're thinking maybe a seasonal part-time type help.
And
Yeah.
just, you know, those 2 months or so.
Yeah.
That's something good
It's good.
to know about now, think about now as a budgetary standpoint.
Thank you, Diane. It's like, name goes back to council. Next up, our HR director, Michelle Fiber. Good afternoon.
Thanks, Dr. Giovanni, and happy you might not. Like my name is Michelle Vibert, I'm the Human Resources Director. I started with the town at the end of August in 2021. So we have put together, as you know, just to give a brief history, I think you may be familiar with the fact that the Human Resources Department is fairly new. It's a standalone department. Before my time, it had started with a major role retiring, so it was the HR administrator and the assistant treasurer. And so really when I came on board, it had become an HR manager, which didn't seem like it could cover enough of the town's needs. And so now it's developed into an HR director as well as a benefits coordinator and HR generalist. So where we're at currently is we are looking to add a new position, a 40-hour-a-week position. Reason being is we're uncovering a lot. Since that retirement had happened, we recently ran a benefits audit, which we're still undergoing. And there's a lot of discrepancies we're finding, whether it's due to folks still being on our bills that canceled insurance, they terminated, they're not receiving a deduction. The list goes on. I can go into more detail if you have questions on that. But there are many duties that were under one department before, and now we're finding that there is really no system of checks and balances where we're at. So I'd love to set up a system of checks and balances for the processes that we do have and make these processes more efficient. And what we're finding is that, you know, one simple task could be developed out of the HR department and then transferred to the finance department to be put through payroll. Because that payroll aspect is a whole other realm, a whole other world. So we're just finding that having it under one department is not very efficient. It's not good for reconciliation, and that really needs to be done. When this stuff is not done, it can be costly for the town. You know, people still bring in on the bill for a year. I think Steve had mentioned it to you. You know, it just becomes costly for the town. So that extra position will be delving into, you know, while the HR director is pulled to higher level personnel issues, labor relations, union matters, the list goes on for that. But the benefits coordinator has a lot to do. And I always say that, you know, this is a small town, but the needs of the retirees and employees are anything but small. Everyone needs something. Everyone has a different degree to what an emergency means. But an emergency is to somebody, whether it be a letter they need, follow-up, a phone call back. I mean, that's a lot of follow-up for people, and we just don't have the staff to do it. And, you know, we want to make this a good town to come work for. And with your benefits and your HR department, that's a huge outreach to the public and the residents. And, you know, letting them know this is a good town to work for. And so we don't want to be that department that lacks with the customer service end. So that's our reasoning for that change on the hourly aspect on that line item. You'll see a bigger difference from 2022 to 2023. Everything else has pretty much stayed the same from what it was before, within, you know, a few dollars here and there. We did increase, with the exception of professional services. The finance director had suggested I increase that due to the fact that if we didn't receive another position in helping with accruals and benefits and follow up with those employees and retirees, then we could reach out to have contract services. So that line item is there. So my recommendation would be that if that position was pushed forward, that you could knock that back down to 20,000 instead of going up to 30,000. Other than that, everything is, along the lines, like I said, within a few dollars here and there from the 2022 projection. That's the HR budget.
Any questions? From the finance?
I do.
Yeah, I have, I don't let you go, Steve.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
It was a lot easier for Ann and I to operate because we were in the same department and doing things. So the cooperation between the two of you needs to be pretty good. Divvying up the tasks and figuring out who's going to handle what piece of between the payroll system and the HR system. So I would hope the two of you are really talking and working those things out.
We don't talk at all.
Okay.
No, actually, so Sean and I, when I got on board, Sean had approached me that needed to be done. That was one of the biggest tasks, and it's still ongoing. So this isn't a 2-second conversation that you can have where you say, yep, you do this and I do this. This is an ongoing, like you said, it's a work in progress of developing what each department is doing, deciding what is an HR function versus a finance function. You know, it was easier for yourself and Ann because, like you said, you were in the same department. We're not, and it is a different role with overlap, but we need to figure out what the divide is and then what that overlap can be. So there is a system of checks and balances. Because there's so much, I always say when one paper comes across the desk, there's about 20 steps to it. You don't want to miss one of those 20 steps because it can snowball and it can create a bigger issue for the town. So it is having that collaboration with the finance department to figure out what those duties should be, where they should fall, and then having that system of checks. But we are talking. Today, anyway.
Yeah, I would add last June, we dissolved the personnel board, Joe and I, that's committee or that board. I think I probably saw this coming when we established an HR department over the way to the finance that can describe some of the issues and Steve did too. I think we didn't know what this was going to completely look like. We had an idea, but I think having to absorb the classification, personnel issues, the bylaw, any type of bylaw changes, review and things like that with HR. I expected something like this, and then the benefits, which is always something that we have to look at. So this doesn't surprise me. I think it's probably ahead of schedule because you've been able to kind of look at some of these issues right away. And we got into it, the benefit side, and seeing where we really need to start working on putting more time into things when you couldn't possibly do it all. So I appreciate this. And I think it's definitely an important thing that we really need to look at this position seriously.
Just to piggyback on what you said, Mr. Chairman, I think we as the select board have stressed the importance of diversity advisory group, committee, whatever we're calling it. And I think that's something that we need to focus on. It's on our agenda the 24th. Hopefully that will give Michelle and the HR department some assistance and fill in some of those gaps. I think that this has been identified as something that we didn't know what we didn't know. Right? And now the professionals come in to fill the role. She's telling us this is what she needs to run to the job. We should find this from our employees and our HR director to do their jobs.
And even the employee labor relations piece, the You and I have even talked about this, made its way onto the position, your position description, so that kind of draws what is that going to look like from your office? How much are you going to engage in labor talks with some of the different unions and things? So those are all things still to be determined, but they're still right now, as it stands, it's pulling you away. It can be a very big part of the day if anyone's ever been in labor negotiations, so it takes a lot of time, so.
If I may, Mr. Chair, thank you for bringing that up. So one of the things that I was looking at the transition and the evolution of this position itself. When it was changed from an HR manager to an HR director, I know that was done with the assistance of the personnel board. I don't believe that position ever came back to the select board for us to take a look at it. And one of the things that Gary just mentioned was the whole labor relations union negotiation component that was added into the job description when it transitioned from HR manager to HR director. And so that was something I don't think that we as a board ever really talked about, but based on what Michelle was just, saying to us, in addition to what she's identified with her professional expertise, having taken this position on and resumed this position in itself has been a lot, trying to straighten things out and improve processes and everything. But now we've added another component to the position in itself that I think that maybe we need to really talk about and examine and just have that conversation exactly what that does entail. And I think definitely getting the personnel advisory committee on board will certainly help alleviate some of the additional workload that the department.
Anybody else? Anybody on camera? Anyone at home with Zoom group? Have any comments?
Just a quick question. How many full-time employees does the town have?
On the town side, it's about,
So we just did W-2, it's around 740, 750.
Full-time
Oh, no, not,
that's
I don't know
full-time
the
and
full-time
part-time.
equivalent.
and part-time?
Yeah, that's everybody in the deal.
Was there follow-up, Tom? Yes, generic question.
No, I mean, I work in employee benefits. I work with HR departments every day. If we had our clients that are that big have very robust HR departments.
Yeah.
They'll have a senior VP of HR, they'll have an HR director, they'll have a benefits manager, they'll have a payroll manager.
Yeah, sure.
They'll have a talent acquisition person. I mean, so a 700, we call it 700 lives, right? That's how we describe it, is a robust department. So we would expect those departments to have fewer people, a lot more people than what we have here.
Yeah, and we don't even really talk about talent acquisition and how competitive the state has become. We're feeding off each other's towns around us, the communities throughout the Commonwealth. And the time that you have to, if you even remotely want to dedicate towards that type of thing, we can't even touch upon that right now. So that's it. So what would we have to do? We have to contract that type of stuff out, which costs money. So that all goes into a position that, that we potentially have. So I think this is a smart way to get ahead of the curve a little bit.
Yep.
And see where it takes us and how the town grows, and how our team grows. So I think the town departments, that's a larger number than I thought, surprisingly.
Yeah, fortunately, we just ran it today, so.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I just wanted to comment that we have to make sure that we remember the value of the cost of those kind of mistakes. We don't have people to cover, and it's really, what you spend versus those mistakes can be well worth it.
And if I could just follow on to that, we unfortunately were not able to track that number because we were just trying to chip away and get it done. And So even if we came up with a number, it would be much larger than that of how much the town has actually spent. And I do want to say that, you know, it's nice to see other folks working with HR departments that do understand, because this is not specific to Middleton. I've worked in other communities where I walked into the same issue. We pay a month in advance. It's never exactly 1 month you're capturing for deductions. And now you have to capture that adjustment amount that you need if someone hops onto the plan mid-year or leaves the plan mid-year. And it's never apples to apples. And it costs $200, you owe $200. And if you're not grasping that concept, the town is spending the money. And it's more than the contribution amount they agreed to pay. And sometimes it's 100% for the employee. And that can be very costly if they're on a annual plan, depending on which plan you're on.
Any other questions? Good. All right.
Paul or Matthew?
Greg and Alvin, you good? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Sean.
Talk to you.
Keep talking.
Next up is Mark Corey. We're 2 minutes late. I apologize. That's pretty good.
I'll get you on track. Certainly not gonna need the whole 30 minutes that I was just saying. Good evening, people in the room, people at home, hello. Mark Corey, Executive Director at Selbrd Community Television. For the past 10 years since we've been a department, the good news is always that it doesn't cost the town anything. On the town meeting, you vote 0 line item for mixture, what the taxpayers pay. So that's always good news, and it's continuing this year as well. So we'll be fully funded from the cable fees that we get from Comcast and Verizon. We, overall, just a few key points to point out. There is a 4.5% or $16,000 increase to our budget this year, which includes COLAs and steps, as well as anticipated increases in benefits. The remainder of the operating budget is projected to be stable, same as last year. We are in negotiations with Verizon for a new contract. It expired in December, but we are still negotiating in good faith with them. And they have, in principle, agreed to, they're looking at a 5-year license instead of a 10-year license. And the first 3 years is when they would fund the capital funding for our department. We still get the 5% of gross revenue every year for the length of the 5 years. But in addition, they give us capital money to go towards capital finance. And they have said they've agreed to $150,000 for that. So, or $100,000 for that over 3 years. So we'll get $333,000 and whatever, 333 for each of the first 3 years of the license. That's what we anticipate. The ink is not on the paper yet, but that's what we anticipate they'll agree to. The Comcast license that we just signed was $150,000 over 10 years, plus the 5% gross every year. So that comes out to a $15,000 every year for 10 years. So that's one. If you look at our capital line and you see the number 48,000, that is 48,333. That is the 2 capital dollars that are from those 2 companies for our capital items. So we put that in a line item, not specifically targeted towards anything in particular, but so we would have it in case of emergency or we needed to buy equipment mid-cycle. before, between town meetings and stuff like that, because much like highway department, if the truck goes down, you have to replace it right away somehow. So that's a kind of our emergency fund. One thing that is on our radar, in our 10-year capital plan, we had put for the fiscal year FY '26 as replacing our van, the Marshmallow, as we call it.
Scooby-Doo van.
Yeah, Scooby-Doo. And it has since kind of died before that. So we're still looking at determining the best funding options for that, whether it would come out of this capital money that we have here, which would be available after July 1st, or some other mechanism with the town. Right now, we're using our own vehicles to transport equipment to shoots and things. It's never a good thing to do that. So we're going to bump that to as soon as possible for replacing the van. We don't need something that's state of the art. We've often talked about making a van with a mobile production studio in it, but in order to do that, we would need a secure place to park it. And unless they build us a garage in the bottom of the new senior center, we'd have to park it down the town garage. And that means, it's just a pain to not be right on campus where we're loading and stuff. And it's also not good for equipment to be out in the elements. You know how cold it can get in the winter, and if it's not in the garage. So that's about it for the overall 30,000 foot view. Again, I bring this up, and I have brought it up for the past probably 4 years or so. The trend in public access around the state and the country, quite frankly, is that people are finding alternative ways to watch television, except, other than cable. So, cutting the cord is going on. And when people cut the cord, that means that our funding would naturally drop. Right now, we still have not seen a dip in our funding. Mostly, we have seen a dip in the number of subscribers, but the company keeps raising their rates, so it equals out in the end, but I don't think that's sustainable forever. So at some point, I would like to have a discussion about the future of LCTV as far as being some sort of a hybrid, since everybody likes that word these days, where we would fund as much as we could through the monies that we receive, and then the town would fund the additional monies that would be needed. Again, we're good for this year. And when I did my 10-year plan, and we decided to hire our second person at 40 hours, we figured that current pace we could sustain 5 years of sustainability by ourselves without asking the town for anything. So that's the projection, and we're still on that projection. So, but it'd be nice to have those conversations now so that we can start to plan for what to do when the time comes, and most likely it will come. I think though, we've proved to be a pretty valuable asset in the town as far as, we used to be a want, and I think now we're more of a need. And, that's all I have to say about that for us. Yeah.
Quick question on the licensing. So Comcast is still a 10-year license. It's obviously when Verizon moves to a 5-year, it's due because they expect something to change in 5 years, a rate or something beneficial to them. They're not just going to come out and do it for the benefit of the town. So We expect Comcast our next time around, probably shorten their license.
Could be, they could want an equal playing field, you know?
Yeah.
Usually that's what they like when they're looking at multiple companies within a town offering cable. There is a neutral playing field clause in each of the licenses.
So how unique is that? When you look at the communities around this, the two licenses we
Yeah,
carry,
it is very unique, and it's also unique that Comcast usually has stuck with a 10-year plan. And Verizon, for the past, I'd say 3 or 4 years, has shortened their licenses from 10 years to 5. In fact, when we signed, we just finished the Verizon license. That was actually a 15-year license. So we're actually cutting it from 15 and 5, whereas the Comcast was a renewal of another 10-year license. So, but anyway, they're doing that because if something comes up with a new technology gets invented, 5G or whatever, and they want to jump ship, they don't want to be bound to a 10-year agreement. So they're looking for 5 years with an option to get out at 3, which is why our funding is top heavy at 3 years, just in case they decide to go.
Mr. Chairman, are we counting to them with a 10-year, with a kicker or some sort of out clause or some sort of de-escalator?
No, we haven't. It's not going to happen. 10 years is not going to happen. Every other town that's negotiated in the past 3 years has gone with 5. So
That's theirs.
that's their, yeah, and that's kind of where they're sticking at now. And they've got the lawyers and the money to spend if we want to drag it out and try to go for 10, which, I say what we're doing is trying to get the best 5-year deal, even with the top heavy funding for capital. Now, the other thing I'll say is that they haven't opted out in any other town. And in some towns are on their second 5-year renewal. So they just have continued the practice just in case something comes up with 5G and the technology. So they're not there yet. We don't anticipate that. We don't see it right now, but that's just the way they do it.
I think a lot of the cell tower leases are following a similar track.
But what was the question? Sorry, I couldn't remember this.
No, I think you answered it, right? I was
I did.
wondering if there was an opportunity for us to put in, so they're sliding us down from 15 down to 5. So they're cutting it by 2/3. And we're looking for 10. And the history with them is that 5 years is kind of where their sweet spot is with a 3-year deal.
Right.
So they want the potential 3-year out clause.
Right.
Option. My thought was if we could get them to the 10 with some sort of out clause or, front loaded to 5 and give them some out clauses within those second 5 years. Just to try to give us some stability. It's negotiation. So they're looking for as much stability as they can find. And we're on the other side of the stick where we're
We have
there's not a
talked
lot of
about
games in town.
we talked about it with our attorney that's representing us in the negotiations. He felt that the 5-year plan was what was happening. 10 years was not a negotiation tactic. Right. They're just not doing it. No other town has got it. They're in the process of 1,000 renewals right now over the country, which is why and it seems like they have one team doing them all. So it's not, it's a very slow process. As you know, at the select board meeting, we signed a letter to a preliminary denial, which just basically extends the time out that you can negotiate, which we still are doing. There's movement finally, but I think it'll be favorable for LCTV. I mean, with a 10-year license, I think we got like 50 or 60,000 capital. So we're getting a much better deal this time around. And I think that's good for us.
Yeah, you're comfortable with
Yeah.
the professional. The attorneys advise us.
And the success of the LCTV. It's linked directly to their success, not the other way around, but I have to, so they're going to be continuing to make money until they can't anymore, but that's not going to happen. So they're going to continue to raise their rates, which will continue sustained unless there's a breaking point, which you've kind of spoken a little bit to on the horizon. This can't keep up.
Yeah, I would.
If subscribers continue to drop, so.
Right.
Yeah, it's, so.
Okay. Mark, I guess one question on the salary budget, variance, so we have two different numbers in our book, so, but the actual budget has 7613, and then the narrative has increased by 20,980, which probably the large number, plus that's towers, someone that,
I can look at it. I'm just going with what gets printed off to me. So if there's a discrepancy, I'll look at it with Sean.
Okay.
Get back to you on that.
Thanks.
And just quickly, do you still provide services in Boxborough?
Yes, we do.
Does Boxborough have its own service at all, that we provide everything to them?
We have a InterMunicipal Agreement with Foxborough. They pay us a flat rate 4 times a year, every quarter. And that helps to offset some of our, that's another form of revenue for us. So it goes into our revenue bucket.
So is it a plus for us?
Yeah, it is. It is. They've grown too, because of our involvement. So, we look at the services we provide. When they ask for more, then the price goes up. We're not trying to rip them off or anything. We want to be fair, and everything on paper shows exactly how we come to that figure. But there's a cost to do business, and that's what we charge them for that. But they're very happy with us. They're, Kirby is the main supervisor over there. That's his part of his hours. 10 hours of his time, his 40 hours goes to Bloxborough.
Just on the $20,000 difference, I think it just includes the taxes and health insurance increases, 7613 plus those next 4 items.
Couple thoughts, more than questions, relative to the van. Has that been diagnosed? You know what the issue is with the van?
Yeah,
It's a marshmallow.
the transmission is gone. It's a 2004. It's
Well, no, yeah, I get it. Yeah. Is there any opportunity for us, whether it's going to work or not, probably you need to keep it in your plan, but Neshoba Tech is at our disposal. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to put that somewhere in the queue for Neshoba Tech to, if they mess it up and they further damage the non-working transmission, so be it. Just a thought, might be something we could offer up.
yeah.
And I'm not looking for any answers if you say yes or no. I just want to throw it out there as a possibility. I think that we should leverage the Neshoba Tech a little more for our printing. There's a lot of opportunities for us to collaborate.
I think the van, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of other departments in town that run a van that we could refit for what you need. If, the schools, that'd be the only one that I can think of where you could take a van that their life cycle is a lot shorter than what you just described this van being,
Right.
where we could actually potentially utilize it. That way we've done it. Mr. Mullins' vehicle was refitted for the police.
With services.
Yeah, so we're just kind of getting into this, and I don't know if you've really been aware of that, but trying to take some of the other departments, when the vehicle reaches a life cycle for them, which is a much shorter, obviously, emergency vehicle.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the school maybe somebody can ask them. But
Just a thought for repair.
Yeah, I'd like to have an old cruiser or one of the engines.
yeah, well, not even for the fitted out, like you use that one, but more so, when you're talking about transporting equipment with your own vehicle, that kind of hits,
Yeah.
that's probably not.
The van's been a catch-22 for us because we don't use it a lot. And unfortunately, when you don't use it a lot, things happen when it's just sitting there. So then you don't feel like using it at all because when you get into it, something's always wrong with it. So I think if we perhaps had a nicer vehicle, we would schedule more outside productions just to keep it running, keep it going. You know, it's putting the chicken first and then getting eggs out of it.
So that might be Mr. Wilson's point. If there is an Explorer coming offline from the police department or from the commissioner or something like that, that might be something that we can purpose it and letter of an LCT or something like that. The other thought or question I had was relative to, I know that some community local access organizations do allow for advertising on one of their channels. I don't know which one of the channels it would be, if it's public access, which one it would be, but is that something that you looked at all, whether it be for local businesses or just something, I'm just looking at another revenue stream, if in fact people are going to be cutting the cord in the argument for other opportunities to raise funds, that's the NFL added an extra game so that we're advertising.
Right. Well, we've been exploring all sorts of options, that being one of them, having advertising on the channels, having pay-per-view for some of the events, like not selectmen meetings, but
Must see TV.
but maybe some of the sporting events, but I'm not in favor of it right now. I'd like to keep public access free and accessible to people, as long as, you're getting it everywhere else from somewhere. Someone's always trying to nickel and dime you to death. And it would just be nice to have something that's free for people. And I understand that's a perfect world that I live in, but in the real world, it's not always possible. So, but we are looking at options and that's one of them. Right now, the FCC doesn't allow advertising on public channels, but I'm not sure about the government or the education. I just know the public channel is not allowed.
I know that, I was speaking specifically to the town of Stoneham, they allow for, there are businesses that advertise with the restaurants and automotive repair shops, that kind of thing, as well as during campaign season, March, April, May, what have you. Different candidates will buy ad space and they'll do a video, or they'll just pop up something that says, for.
Yeah, we used to have a classified ads channel in the old days of Neshoba Cable. Remember that? Yeah, out of Westford, and that's what that channel was for. But my understanding was always that advertising was not allowed. So I don't know. A sponsorship is something different. Sometimes stations get around the advertising by saying this show is sponsored by the sub shop, and then of course I just gave a plug. But anyway, I'll be down after the show's over. No, but and in lieu of that, they give pizza for the crew, and then you say this show is sponsored by. So you have to use up the money or the goods or services that they're providing for that show. That's sponsorship. It's different than advertising, even though it is an ad.
Mutual.
Yeah, it's technically called sponsorship.
Just thoughts, just while you were speaking, just stuff I jotted down.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, Mark,
Thank you very much.
Well,
Yeah, have a
have a
good
good
day.
year. Thanks for everything you do.
Thank you.
Right, so moving on, accounting, this would initially be Alicia O'Donnell's position. Sean O'Brien has the distinction of trying to fill her shoes. For those who don't know, Alicia suffered from a serious illness, so we're all wishing her well and hoping we can get to work and stays healthy. So, but for now, we're going to have Sean's going to take over some of the items on the agenda that Alicia would typically present to us. So I would ask to keep that in mind, asking questions, but of course, ask them and Sean can research as appropriate. So.
Yeah, so I wasn't so good.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so accounting.
Sure, so I'm actually gonna do, all of finance today too. But if there's anything, like I said, that you need to look into and get back on, happy to do so. Starting with accounting. From a bottom line perspective, it's on page 59 in the book. Going up around 97,000 or 37%. I know that sounds like a lot, but 60,000 of that is because we included the audit line that was previously separated, included in the accounting budget. So on the next version of the book, we'll parse it out so it's a little easier to, and a little bit more transparent to see that. So our usual audit costs are $45,000 a year. It's going to be another around 15,000 or so based on needing to do a single audit, which is if you have federal funds of over $800,000, I believe, there's an additional audit requirements for those funds. So that provides for the CAFR as well as the single audit because the town through CARES, ARPA, ESSER has taken in a good sum of money which qualifies us for the audit. The other big piece in here is the new position proposed, which is the financial analyst. Part of the rationale behind this position, as kind of Alicia and I talk about, is 1, 2, 3. Have one person who's really a superstar at the position, have a second who's a really dependable backup, and have a third who's can break glass and kind of fill the shoes for that period of time. Where we're at right now as a overall department is we have a lot of great individual contributors, but we really need to work on breaking down silos and really putting an emphasis on cross-training for those core functions. So we really believe that with this analyst position, that a lot of our core functions will be properly backed up so that we don't have to call consultants for $100, $200 an hour, which is just not the most efficient use of funds. So ideally, we'd like this position to support AP, our reconciliation process, support payroll, and also support collection functions during peak periods. So it's kind of a jack of all trades role, but I think it's really something that could be a really strong developmental position, but also provide us the bandwidth to have those meaningful crossovers so that all the core functions have at least a number 1 or number 2 that can make sure that the town and department is in a good spot. So that's where I'll leave off the accounting budget, but I'll open it up for questions on it.
I have one, so just I'm trying to track, so I know we limited the audit and I'm assuming $15,000 for single audits got added to the PF commercial services line. Do you know what the other 10 grand and PS increases before?
So the 45,000, the base audit plus the 15 is the single audit. So that 60 makes up the professional services line.
They're eliminating 34.
Okay, so that's the entirety of the PS line now is just frauds and whatever.
Yeah, and then you'll see in conferences and meetings as well as travel and dues and subscriptions, that provides additional funds for training that were previously in there. Additionally, I think if you look back at professional services, those are some of the consulting firms that we've used
to help support sort of accounting functions that we in the past contracted out. This year, I know Alicia and Michelle worked hard to take everything in-house that they can, and we're able to, you know, complete the balance sheet on time, do all the rest of the state reporting. I think all wrapped up by November, so it was really credit to them for stepping up.
Many of those professional services or consultants that we hired were very much reactive.
Yeah.
And it was to kind of help us through a time, or bridge a gap, that kind of thing. Whereas we're sort of more proactive in trying to get ahead of things.
Yeah, that's correct.
That makes sense. Plus the financial analyst position, I'm sure we're gonna take it. Yeah, correct. Well,
Yeah.
all right, thanks.
You know, I'll make the big pitch right here for the financial analyst.
Maybe you would.
I can tell you that the accounting department has been understaffed for years. That's why they utilize CLA over the past couple of years for those things. And there's no reason for that. This provides a lot of backup positions that we need.
I agree with the previous
Speaker. I yield the floor to the previous speaker.
Thank you. And I know I spent a lot of time down there with you and Alicia, and see the work that goes on. Currently I'm an intern. That's not Alicia's hair yet, but you guys keep them extremely busy. So, thank you for the pitch. I'm aware this is also not completely a byproduct of dividing HR and finance, but I think a new HR or a finance director coming in and really kind of scrutinizing the program and aligning things the way she wants, and also define this missing or this gap along with the discussion with you. So, thanks for bringing it forward. Any questions? Typically,
Thank you. This point is not so much specific to the position that Tom was just speaking to, but a more general one. And, you know, some of the veterans, Steve Venuti, certainly maybe some of our other folks will remember that we had been used to seeing in budget summaries, at least at different points in the past, a summary sheet that would show all new positions over prior year. There, you know, this budget presentation is excellent. The book is terrific, but it lacks in that area where you're able to determine, you find your baseline where you were last year. And I don't just mean in dollars and cents, but in actual positions. As we know, that's, of course, the component of the budget that has the biggest impact over time with its associated growth factors. And I'd particularly like to see in our next opportunity to look at the budget comprehensively, a list of all those departments and all those positions that are actually new over current on the on the payroll as we currently constitute it. And in fact, if I were to get real ambitious about what I'd be asking for, I'd love to see where we're at compared to what our head count was a couple of years ago, because we've actually already been making steps aggressively and unapologetically about addressing needs with personnel, but that shouldn't be lost in this process. So I would ask that we see those before we make any decisions on what to endorse, what not to endorse, as far as how many positions we're collectively looking to add, and that would be part-time, full-time, whatever equivalencies they meet. And then, as I say, ideally, where we stand today versus where we were 2 years ago in terms of head count, just to see what we've been doing and then what we're proposing to do. I say this both just as a general context, that's good practice going forward in every year's budget review process, but especially when we know we're looking at a couple of tough budget years ahead of us. So until some of the prospective commercial growth comes in that, we're all hopeful about, we know we got a couple of down years, and I have qualms about our ability to support new permanent hires until that has been established as fact in the revenue stream. I would personally be looking to prioritize within the range of asks, even if it can be shown to be work budgetarily, in a gap period until those revenues come in. Our sustainability over time, of course, has always been paramount, and it's one of the keys to why we're so highly regarded by, bond rating agencies. I would say that in the short term, we ought to be real cautious about adding positions that aren't either driven by current public safety and public health need. And if we are going to be considering that, then we owe it to ourselves in the town to be very much scrutinizing of its ability to sustain itself over time on real revenue streams. So I'll leave it at
that. Thank you, Paul. Any comments?
I'm just going to comment, in the budget book that we have, on page 8, it does show in the budget highlights for FY23, an increase in FTE and benefit eligible benefits or employees added. But then if you look at page 70 and you look at work under workload indicators, you look at number of employees, June 15th of FY 2019, we have 786 lives whereas in 2022, 2023, we're at 725 and 730 respectively. So I'm trying to wrap my brain around.
Yeah. I see what you're pointing at, Chuck, and it is there in some form, but it is not as clear as saying where we're at right now, where we were at, and where we propose to be at.
I recall, Mr. Glavia, I recall what you're referring to. It was really a one-sheet document that explains that we've had in previous budget presentations. I think we could probably get that back together, at least if not by our next meeting for the Saturday when we actually are really.
Sure. No, I'm not looking for anybody to jump tonight and create it. It's just a thought that comes up as we're looking at it as it's presented tonight. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's what I was doing.
No, it does make it a little easier as well to visualize. I agree. I don't think you're going to be going anywhere, Sean, for a while. So.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty good stuff.
You are also giving me the tax collector.
Yeah, so I'll do treasurer, tax collector, and then assessor.
Oh, good, treasurer and tax. Okay. 65.
So for the treasurer budget, we're looking at increase of 8% over the FY22 budget. Most of that's driven by the salary piece. The big new initiative here is kind of goes part and parcel with what Michelle was speaking to earlier, is proposing a regrade for the assistant treasurer to go up another level to grade 11.
part of this is that this employee's done exceptional job over the last year plus. She's been a great bridge between HR and the payroll functionality of the town. It's really been that person that I've leaned on quite a bit to help the office run. So that's really the big initiative out of my budget. But yeah, I'll open it up for any questions on that.
And that position is currently graded to that a 9.
It's a 10, so we go from a 10 to an 11.
Has the job been graded yet, Sean?
It has not been regraded.
And this is based more on, I don't want to say the individual, because working the position, but also with the restructure and the department of added responsibilities that are actually driving this grade.
Yeah, so it's, I think anytime you review a position and propose a regrade, you're supposed to look at it 100% based on the position. I can't do that. I'm more of an 80-20 guy, you know, if 80% on the position function, the value it adds, and then 20% on what the individual makes that position. So this person's gone above and beyond on numerous occasions and is extremely consistent, diligent, and very professional, and has really helped bridge some of those challenging issues between HR and payroll, and has been invaluable to the benefits piece. From a pure financial standpoint, she's also has completed courses at Suffolk to get her management certificate from there in public finance, and also it's taken accounting courses. So she's definitely a jack of all trades and really valuable. So this is something that where the dollars probably equate to around a $3,000 increase for the individual, but it's invaluable to retain talented and professional finance individuals, especially in the public sector. So that's what we're all kind of thinking as the department to provide promotional someone else who's done a great job.
So where you're not requesting a new position, this is really so like this will be going to the select board
Yes.
approval.
Yep.
So it's more of a heads up to the finance committee. This won't come up on our what Mr. Glady was speaking to when we're looking at a new position. It's not a new position. It's something that the select board will have to deal with probably between now and town meeting, and then have to come up with town meeting for.
Yeah, it's not saying that
The budget.
non-benefits eligible to benefits eligible. It's literally.
It's what the personnel board used to have that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I think that you spoke to a lot of gave a lot of accolades to Anna. We asked a lot of you when things changed, and she stepped up.
Yeah,
And became your right hand. And answered a lot of, stepped into a lot of shoes that she didn't necessarily sign on for. So it's, we can all say other duties that assign, any position we take, right? And, she got a lot of other groups that assigned. Steve spoke to the HR stuff, and that all lived under and the treasurer's office, and Anna kind of assumed that role, and has been a good resource to you and to Michelle in her transition to the director of HR.
Absolutely.
So, something that we'll have to look at your presentation and reasoning that you sound.
Just a reminder that remember the value of the employee is always in the grade. Unfortunately, the human resource classification, some of us know it's definitely not on the person that's on the position. So we're talking to Michelle and working that position. Make sure it's in there, because unfortunately that passion has to be taken out of it.
Oh,
The value of an employee, and that's all we want to talk about. Make sure it's in the position description. That's all. So we recognize the value and competitiveness of all finance positions. We can speak to it, we live it, so getting good finance teams put together in town are really competitive. So, thank you. Any questions? For that piece? All right. Anyone? We're good. Tax in, where is the tax title? Yeah, name,
Yeah, title is level funded at,
page 9 or
1690,
90.
yeah. At 15,000 mark. This basically covers mailing and then our filing fees that, the full. Probably gonna be some more activity, sooner as tax title takes years in the making before, decisions are made, but, I think level funding is suffice for that.
Any questions on tax title? G collector. So you're doing this presentation on behalf of Ms. Richards?
Yep. So, the big,
Page 67.
yep, so, one of the, biggest changes that we have in terms of the lines, the other services line. Now this covers, our mailing fees for, Kelly and Ryan, who's our deputy, collector. It also provides, for our lockbox, services with what was Century Bank and now it's, part of Eastern Bank. So those are for, mailed in payments that get processed off site and then we have file upload. And then we also have within that line item, 6,000 for, Tyler Cashier's, software support. So, it's part of Munis. So, we're still in the process of vetting out Tyler Cashiering, but it was one of the modules that, provides us with cash register and, equipment to scan bills, provide, receipts for payments and so forth. So we're in the process of kind of exploring that with, some of the other towns once, the Omicron settles down a little bit, do a few visits there to see, firsthand how effective it is. So that's sort of the big add, in there. The other change in terms of collections that we're leaning on doing is to mail quarterly bills. Right now we, for real estate taxes, right now we mail the preliminaries together, which does save the town money, but it also, I've just been noticing a lot of later payments that have come in, and I think that's, a lot of people have a lot going on right now, so I think at least if we mail it out every quarter, it'll cost us more, but I think we might get a better collection percentage and better customer service out of it. So, so it might be a few thousand extra for mailings, but we'll be able to cover that within the proposed appropriation. So those are the big changes we're looking into. Obviously, the cashiering piece is important, but we want to make sure it's quality before diving in on that. So.
Any questions from the boards? Okay, thank you for that. Yes, you're presenting for the assessor.
Yep.
Got you.
So. Most of the changes in the assessor's department come from the staff that we just hired. So Brendan started
last year, and then April was just brought on this fall. So those are some of the changes there. And as part of that, we're really looking to focus on training and development for those staff. I think assessing is part of municipal finance, but it's sort of different from the accounting and cash management piece that we're all used to. So if we think municipal finance is then assessing everything in terms of, recruiting, retention. So that increase of from $2,600 in meetings and conferences is to help those staff get the training so that they're up to speed within the Mass Assessors Association, so that they can get their certification and designation. So really the big point in talking with Kathy is just to be able to fund the training opportunities. She's also working on an interesting project with potentially a flyover company that'll update the GIS maps that we have in town to catch construction that's going on. So for all permits and values. So I think that might be a FY24 thing, but it's just interesting, and she's still going through the process of reviewing vendors and getting down on something. So interesting stuff, but she's really focused on staff development, building the team over there. So
This is probably not a question for you, Sean, maybe it's more for Anthony. Sean's talking about professional development for that staff. And in the HR budget, there's a line item that's been added to for professional development. The double counting things, is there a way that people don't know they can utilize the HR budget for that stuff?
So a couple of things on that, Steve. That professional development was done a while ago. I actually think I was here as assistant. They kind of pushed into that because we hadn't had a line on professional development. So that is a town-wide. That's for everybody. Professional development. I think what they're looking for is in addition to that, some of the annual certifications that I think Sean, right, that you need as a treasurer and Kathy needs, and Kathy's also assistant assessor, has to be certified, so she has to work on that. So I think that's above and beyond what they're looking for.
What the HR budget?
Correct.
Is there a plan in place or a policy in place how to use those funds? And do people know how to access those funds?
There's certain things that we should be doing on a yearly basis, sexual harassment policy training, etc. So I think now that Michelle's here, as soon as she can get her head above water, I think that that's some kind of plan that we'd like to put in place as far as professional development that we do for all employees, as well as individual opportunities that could be available that they could request that through HR and then consider approving that.
Okay.
One of the things that we did in the past, you may remember, is the MMA and Suffolk Certificate Program in Government Leadership and Management. We sent, I believe, Alicia Day, Liz Trediak went. So we sent 2 people to that, and that was $3,000. I think if you talk to each one of them, they had great experience with that. It really helped them in their professional growth.
Okay.
So the HR training budget is mostly for when you're talking about training all the time.
It's all on employees.
Yeah.
And I think one of the
Different
things,
HR.
we just threw
We
it
have
in
to
that
teach.
budget instead of putting it down to individuals, so we can have a little bit more control and review of what's being requested and what's.
I think we're looking at every department, like if someone parking around needed to get some Excel training, then that would be a bucket that they can use.
As opposed to the specific training of their department for licensing and.
Correct.
Right, some of the stuff that you may see in their individual budgets for professional development is really for their recertifications that they that they each have departments.
And the training budget, I mean, you know, our HR went up a lot this year, it was, our new rivers had it kind of pegged to, high talent in this training, right, so.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing that Anthony and Joe set in on too is some of the Maya safety sessions too. So those are, that'd be another opportunity in some of those funds because we get credit on our insurance too, property liability. So that was just one other thing that came to mind on that.
Any other questions for the assessor budget? All right. I think we might have, all right. We're going to move on. So Alicia was going to present next on the veterans benefits and the animal inspector. So it's all yours.
Yeah, so I mean, the veterans budget is only going up by John Scola, and then a lot of the other veterans, the animal inspectors are level funded, and then likewise for, I think, the one right below that, where Alicia has the disability commission, Memorial Day, Patriots Day, and then the remainder of the committees, those are all level funded from FY17. So I don't really have like a presentation on that, but if there's any discussion.
Flat budget's a pretty easy to recognize. Unless there's some, just thinking forward, looking at a 5-year plan, that this is probably a budget that's going to go up. I think the select board brought that up with the potential for crossing that threshold now of a larger community where that can be have to hire more full-time.
Right.
Or close to full-time.
Right.
So you're looking for that probably salary line in the next few years. I think 10,000 is the market, we're right.
Just over.
We're right there. So how long we have to get that?
It's actually 12,000.
Oh,
So
is it?
we're
Okay,
actually should be good until the
A couple of
next.
years, so within 5 years. So
Even if they go by the census, it could be 10, depending on
Yeah.
what they consider the big. We like the census on that.
okay, so we have time. And that's not.
And having, right, yeah, exactly.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just talking about the Cultural Council and the Shade Tree Committee, those are committees that are appointed by the Select Board, and that was one of the things that we brought forward a few years ago, was funding these committees that we appoint, that we don't usually provide funding for their initiative. I'd like to, and I don't think this is the part of it, but at one point, I kind of want to flag the Cultural Council. We're giving them $5,600. I know that they already get money from the state, and when we did that one year, we kind of matched what the state gave them. But I think, and this is more for the select board, that we really need to revisit exactly where that money is going and have that accounting. And on the flip side of that, the Shade Tree Committee, I know, is very active. We actually do have a plan that was presented to us to replace trees on the common and whatnot. So I just want to mention that now, that that's something that we as a board need to discuss at some point.
So I don't have your next one to discuss. We might as well wrap all
Oh,
this
did I just
together.
jump in?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, sorry.
No, you're right. So the veterans benefits, animal inspector, the veterans, looking at disability commission, Memorial Day, Parade, Patriots Day, historical commission, cultural council, and the Shade Tree, which the staff we just spoke to, the PMPC. That's where we're at right now, correct? Those-
Yeah, so that's more of most of the stuff is level funded, if not all. And it's more of if there's any other discussion points, we can look into the cultural council and see what the expenses were.
We ran out of wreaths on Veterans Day, so we could use a couple of more bucks there.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions on any of those committees, or I know that the smaller budgets, they are fairly level funded right now. Nonetheless, it's important. Certainly when it comes to auditing, we know what money's going. And that's probably one of the benefits of having someone from the council in here. Maybe, yeah, knowing that we can always call someone forward at the next meeting, if someone is definitely a question. Yeah, we can ask those questions.
Right, well, I mean, they solicit, projects.
Yeah.
And it's just curious, and we as a board need to be, have them come forward and just say to us, this is the money that we were provided with, and these are the projects that they went towards. Just because in the past, sometimes it hasn't been any Littleton-based projects. So we just kind of want to be more cognizant about, where that money's going.
This is the right time for that. Those guys will happen.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
All right, let's,
Mr. Chairman, I said it half jokingly a moment ago, but it's true that we've taken to celebrating Veterans Day more formally than we used to, and unlike Memorial Day and Patriots Day, it doesn't have a line item. It's an insignificant bottom line figure there, but for consistency's sake, we probably should include it separately.
Oh, you're talking about the Veterans Day celebration?
Yeah. We don't have a budgeted line item for that, unless I apologize if I'm missing something, but I think we've begun doing that, but we've never really accounted for it in the budget process.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I think just historically, it's really just been a ceremony on the common. I think this year it kind of went, it took a different, it had a different component to it. Other than the wreaths, I don't know what else to add, but we can definitely just add it.
yeah.
I assume the cost would be similar to whatever there is for Patriots Day, Memorial Day, or less than Memorial Day, but similar to Patriots Day.
Yeah, Patriots Day is $0, Memorial Day is $750, but it might even be worth grouping those.
Just so we don't get caught in a situation where you wake up on the day of Veterans Day and realize we have to have wreaths and we haven't provided for it,
Yeah, I think this was the first year, if I believe. That
It's been a couple of years now since we.
Never much.
So I think, yeah, something just to get with Mr. Borowski on and ask him about the Veterans Day. If we're going to continue to have ceremonial things that would potentially require a budget, why don't we link it? Yeah, it makes sense to have that a line item for sure.
Right. Do we know where those costs came out of this year, or was that out of the?
Well, like, I think what Mr. Williams mentioned is we were short, and that's probably because we didn't have a line item. It was used excess money from the other, it wasn't used.
Yeah, I'm thinking of this less in terms of its financial import than its factor as a reminder that we need to do the following.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. All right, we haven't done property or liability insurance and transfers and employee benefits. That would be up next. Right in your wheelhouse. 150.
Spinning my wheels on that. So currently with property and liability insurance, we met with our agent in early December, late November, sometime around then. And they let us know that costs were going to increase anywhere between 5 and 7% based on our experience. So right now that $500,000 in there, I think it's a conservative figure, but we'll have to wait and see until we get our actual numbers, which will likely come February or March on that. So hopefully it doesn't go up that much, but we're trying to be conservative on that, and hopefully it comes in less. But this one, similar to like state aid, is something that we get
information, later. So.
There's no insight for that.
No, you know what, a lot of cities and towns have seen go 5% annually up on that, just based on, number of vehicles, land, property, and, the rates just keep going up and up. And all it takes is, one or two claims to kind of set you out of whack for a few years, so. But hopefully, like, we were talking about that, the safety classes and things like that. Maya has laid out programs that does provide for credits back on this, so that's something that we're definitely interested in looking into for what makes sense for the town.
Any other questions on property and liability? Thank you.
Just curious, Sean, are there any towns ahead of us far enough in this process that we have any real comparisons to go on as far as, we're getting surprised all over the place with inflation items. Is this the year when the insurance companies decide to get bullish and go after us again? I mean, any evidence of that out there yet? I realize we don't have our own hard stuff in-house, but what are you hearing out there?
It's hard because there's a couple angles to it. First, the policies are based off of our experience that we've had, similar with pension, OPEB, things like that. And then secondly, we're not self-insured, we're part of Maya. So we're really gonna have to go off of what most cities and towns use Maya. So we're kind of all in the same boat on that one. Some self-insure, but still you're rolling the dice doing that too. So it's,
we're comfortable with our own experience, right? Or are we, a claim experience?
yeah, I don't, in going through it, nothing out of whack came through at our, annual meeting with, Maya and the team. So, I wouldn't foresee anything being, exorbitant, but still it's something that we have to continually fund and prepare for, so.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Right, no further questions. Let's move on to where you at next. Transfers.
The one page.
152.
So, take a step back on transfers we just talked about, FY 21 for a second. So, due to the pandemic, we budgeted ultra conservatively for 21. As a result of that, we had, from a bottom line perspective, a really good year financially. So that's really, this budget is a little bit more aggressive on the revenue side and seeks to really, meet the needs that we're facing from the expense side. But, as a result of, having a strong year, we're proposing the use of, free cash to really address some of our long-term liabilities that'll really help the town, not only this year, but, for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So it's kind of funding plans like this that really help to stay true to the financial principles, but also, set ourselves up for success. So I'll run through the transfers and kind of talk a little bit about each one. The first line you'll see is the $1,028,000 for capital projects. So this is using free cash to fund cash capital out of our capital budget. So we really feel like the $1 million mark is something that lends to sustainability and helps to replace those core pieces of infrastructure and vehicles that we don't want to have to go to borrow for, but if we spend them and maintain them well, that, we'll be able to be, in a good spot. So this is sort of a, you know, minor to mid-level building improvements and vehicles. So, the capital plan's all detailed in the back. So what we were really trying to do is identify what's new versus replacement costs. So we feel like this $1 million mark gets us to where we need to be for 23.
For those who don't know, can you explain why it wasn't in the budget prior to 21? When we're looking at a 0 FY21, FY20, that was not an item.
Oh, okay. That is, I probably just gotta update that, so that's a formula issue on my part there.
Okay.
But it has been, around $1 million, sometimes even more, sometimes up to 2 or 3, but we're really trying to get to a sustainable mark on cash flow.
If I may, is that not where we had like tens of thousands of dollars for highway for maintenance, tens of thousands of dollars for the fire department for maintenance, tens of thousands of dollars for we kind of rolled it all back into this one area so that if LCTV needed a van, we had a capital. There's no vehicle fund under LCTV, or there was no maintenance fund under vehicle fund under LCTV.
Right,
Is that what some of this?
Yeah, so that's that same sort of line, same account group. It falls under warrant articles, funding from free cash, but the issue that you run into when you say, oh, this article is 25,000 for public works maintenance, is your public works fleet could be decent, but then when your police car breaks down, well, that fund is technically just for, and it doesn't go away until you spend it or vote it on. So that's where, Alicia and I just really want to get away from those restrictions on it. Really, if you're going to have vehicle maintenance issues, put it in your budget or go through the reserve fund process, because that, otherwise we're just going to be parking money and sitting on it without the flexibility if a need does it. So that's kind of where we've gone. We've kind of really tried to pick projects that are actionable to include. So that's how.
Have you and Alicia identified, gone through the capital plan and identified things that fit the new versus the maintenance people?
So we're still working through that. A lot of the stuff that we found was, and this is really helpful, is like vehicle replacement schedules so that we can really anticipate going forward. I think the challenging thing is that you can have some, significant new, buildings going forward, the community senior center, potentially a school way down the road too. So those are things where we're still gotta go through and say, all right, 750,000 of this mill is for replacement, and then 250 is the actual new stuff. Because this number, we still need to go through and say what's actionable, what's not. So just using a personal anecdotal example, so I have 50,000 in here for that Tyler cashiering project to have the hardware at in my office, and then potentially at the transfer station, school department. But if we don't, think that's a good option, then we're reducing that by the 50,000 and putting it to capital stabilization. So if we don't need to do something now, we'll save a problem there.
So you're kind of making the case that capital stabilization in the big picture is so much for new, so much for replacement.
Right.
Is what you're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, it's because it's easy to get enamored with the new thing, but it's important to replace, what you got in the boring stuff like computer schedules and things like that you don't, or system upgrades, HVAC maintenance.
Yeah, I'm not questioning them, but I think this might be something we're going to have to adapt our financial policy
Oh, this whole thing is part of it, so I think what John's saying is he's gone through the free cash
Yeah.
policy. He's identified how much is available to spend on capital. So this 1,028,000 is available in cash to spend. If we don't spend it, then we decide to either put it to stabilization, one of the different stabilization.
That still needs our money. That number,
So just because it's, I'll make the pitch, just because it's there doesn't mean you need to spend it.
right, so it's the same
Because
number
like you
every
said,
year,
there's-
it fluctuates.
there's Plenty of projects coming down the road. We know the senior center is coming down. It makes sense to just start plugging money into that. Keep down in construction. A bond cost.
The next piece is the transfer to general stabilization fund. This is a small amount, but it helps us to keep pace and with our stabilization funding goals, which are, we're definitely in a really good spot with, but it's really, it's not a huge chunk of change to transferring, as you can see, compared to, previous years of transfers in there. But when we're going to borrow for community senior center, when I talk to S&P to go through the credit rating report, and we see that, oh, you've continued to, follow your management principles and put money in the stabilization funds, makes the call a lot easier, smoother, and then we ultimately get better interest rates on our debt. So that move's not critical, but I think it's really, helps the case. And in terms of use of free cash, I think it's a really wise usage on that. We just touched on capital stabilization funding, but that's another 1.3 that we can dedicate for future projects as they come up, because we know very well. The next piece is the transfer of the school building stabilization fund. So this is going to be a new stabilization fund that's been requested to be proposed. The school department had a turn back of around close to $500,000 this year, which is great, because then helps our free cash number. As part of that, they requested to have $450,000 to help fund a feasibility study for the
Shaking Lane.
thank you. I was going to say Russell Street. But
We'll hear more about this on that Saturday when that budget. We heard a little bit already, but I think that number is one of those, it's probably going to be up for further discussion in a couple of weeks when we have to look at it. I mean, if everyone is in agreement on the two boards or the majority that this is where we want to put that money, thinking ahead at that, that was something that the schools have requested. If there's something here that any of us think might be better served somewhere else, then we can discuss that after all the departments spoke with us.
yeah, and I think some of the background for anyone who's not familiar with school building projects, they take a long time. They go through the school building authority, and you need the feasibility study. You need to go through the whole grant process and what they'll fund, what's acceptable for the project, and what's on the individual talent district. So it's a long process. So I'm not sure exactly what the timeline is, but the thought behind this is that it sets aside money so that they can proceed with that one. The time.
I think philosophically too, right? Putting money in stabilization doesn't mean we have to recommend or the feasibility study is here, right? I mean, you kind of do two separate, two separate things, right? Some comment.
Yeah, and with any of these stabilization funds, it's a majority to vote event. and 2/3 to voting. So that's, at least it, protects funds for any of these things for when, we're really ready to pull the trigger on it. Similar to that, we have the, senior center stabilization fund. We put in, $1 million, which would go on top of the, $3 million plus interest that we have currently in our, account for this. I think the fact that we're so close to pulling the trigger and on having the project ready to go, that it will help to offset those debt and interest costs that if we have the money and we're going to do the project, why not do it and save ourselves interest payments and provide borrowing flexibility. So that was a number we kind of threw out there. So, but I think it's definitely good use of the funds. So, but that's similar to the previous one. That's something that obviously we can have discussions on and review as we go forward. The last transfer is the $500,000 to the debt exclusion stabilization fund. So this will help to replenish that account that has around a couple $100,000 in it. And that's used to reduce the impact of debt exclusion so that taxpayers have a smoother bill on exclusions. So we don't have any new ones on there, but it helps to reduce the impact of those.
Right, a lot of money discussed, so I know this is, just keep these kind of tabbed in your mind when we have our discussions in a couple weeks on Saturday after we've met with all the department heads, so we can really discuss those numbers and if they need to shift one way or another to different stabilizations or how we want to look at this. It's just kind of a little bit of homework, I guess, in your own mind if you have other ideas for where you think those money should go. What stabilizations. Obviously, we do have policy that requires the minimums, some of these, but outside of that, you can see that in the previous years, we've really put some healthy transfers into our stabilization funds in the past, outside of greater than more than policy in some circumstances. So now we seem to have a little bit more with projects coming down the line that makes a little more sense.
Yeah, I think like going back to the DMC, we had such a good year based on bad circumstances. So we bare bones budget. That's why we're seeing all the requests coming in now because, a lot of departments have been, operating well, but, kind of need the help. So the good news is we get a lot of free cash on that and we can address some of these costs that, other towns are going to be battling with. For years. The next section for employee benefits. This is going back years. I know some other towns that I looked at had, 500 to 600 million in OPEB liabilities. So that stuff is thankfully not an issue here because I'll seriously take those long-term liabilities. So shift into that, I'll just kind of jump into employee benefits. A lot of the big changes.
Page 1.
Oh yeah, sorry, 160. A lot of the big changes are from Medicare, which is an increase of 46,000. That's a projection at this point. I'm taking FY21 salaries and doing a projection ahead, plus the Medicare calculation of 1.45%. Health insurance, similar to property and liability, we're still waiting on. So put in a projected 8% increase. Hopefully it's not that much. Plus reserve plans if there's new hires or if staff have qualifying events or get married or have kids or turn 26. So that's something that is definitely conservative there. So hopefully those numbers come in lower, but we'll have to wait and see and kind of see what the carriers provide on that. Then the other two that have significant increases are the county retirement contribution and the transfer to the OPEB trust. These are in line with the free cash policy. So it's the base amount of our required contribution plus the advance funding. So really wise use of funds and helps us obviously with our credit call ratings agency calls, but also the flexibility that will open up down the road is definitely invaluable.
So, Michelle, the state liability paid, I think it's 2040, correct?
Yes, yep.
For the OPEB to be 100% funded?
So the OPEB doesn't have any rules around it. It's just it's a
Pension.
yeah. So pension, the state ruling is 2040. Currently, our system's slated to be funded by 2037.
Okay, that was the question. For Milton, the 2037 currently the way that we projected it.
Yeah. So and we're definitely on target. I was just at a meeting. But I was at one in December with the county retirement board, and it was obviously it was great to hear the returns of 30%. So while we provide that advanced funding, I look for us to get some serious bounce back on our funded ratio there. Granted, they smooth it over a 4-year period, but based on those returns. But in terms of cost basis, we're for the next, let's say, 5+ years, we're looking at around like 6.5% increases, which is in line with a lot of other systems I've seen. But after that, it's projected to tail off to 4.5% per year. So we're in a good spot there. It's just it's a little different because there's so many towns as part of the system that how we kind of calculate it's different. So if you look on the state pension website, you'll see how the overall system does, whereas Littleton is a part of that, but because we are more aggressive in terms of funding, we get I think better results.
Any questions on these items? Paul?
Yep, just backed up to Sean on this score here. Sounds like mostly those numbers at this point are driven by our very prudent and aggressive strategies and internal policies. And I'm just curious whether there's any volatility on, say, the county retirement that we don't have any control over, and I'm also curious on a different level whether other towns are starting to do what we're doing, or are we still outliers? With the OPEB, that is.
Yeah, I don't think it's I think it's a good thing that we're an outlier on this because
No, I'm not against it. I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, honestly, I've seen towns 4 or 5 times as big as Littleton contribute 300,000 to OPEB trust, and we're at 2.5 mil. So that's something to be proud of, being able to address that long-term liability and really take it seriously, and likewise for pensions. So not a bad thing not to be a follower on something like this. So I think a lot, and some to some of your points earlier too, it's balancing your current operations with your long-term liabilities. You can't be all in on one or the other, but you have to find the right balance that mix and that's sustainable. So I think for us, while we have this, we're not going to be able to make these kind of contributions every year. So take advantage while the market's hot, and then 10 years from now, somebody's gonna be like, oh, I just have to cover the normal cost of OPEB or, our pension, which is gonna be, closer to $1 million rather than, the, 2.5 to 3 that we're paying. So it's really gonna set you up for a long-term success.
Well, that's what we hope. Any signs that other communities or the state's lack of responsibility here is going to come back to bite us at some point, despite our own good measures and setting aside for these funds? As I say, is there volatility that sends warning signs in any of those accounts on the state or county levels?
So not that I've seen. I know there was a rumor kicked around that, employees were going to get 3 years of credit for COVID, but from the Middlesex County Retirement Board meeting, they shot that down and said that's probably not coming to fruition, which is bad news for me, but good news for taxpayers. But I still got a ways to go. But other than that, no real warning signs jumped out to me from the financial advisor that was presenting. Their allocation seemed in line with everything with PRIT. They got 30% returns and are charging us 50 basis points. So it's really a pretty good deal. So I can't see us being in a really bad spot, or with any outside factors that would seriously, put the town in a bad spot with this liability. So.
All right. Thanks again. Yourself and your predecessor have set us up very nicely.
That guy.
We grabbed him. All right. Well,
Greg's looking.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I've got a question. Sean, these numbers, are they inclusive of all the new employee asks, or are they outside of that?
So we, we'll always run a contingency on the employee health insurance line, but the liabilities in terms of pension and OPEB are calculated as of a specific date for both pension and OPEB. So when we, advance fund one of those, either pension or OPEB, that's part of a snapshot rather than an as-you-go approach.
Okay, thank you.
Let's move on. I think that was it for this evening, is that correct?
I think so.
Yeah, Joe on to speak to the reserve fund transfer.
Okay, so this would be more, I believe the select board's already done this.
They've approved this.
You're welcome.
This is just in Fincom.
You're welcome to stay just in case we get any public.
Oh, yeah,
sure. All right, Joe, you're up, please. This is the reserve fund transfer. We have mentioned that our last meeting. It's not on our agenda. So it is today. Joe? Okay, thank you.
It just took me a little while to get camera situated. So should be quick for everyone. Before the Finance Committee is a reserve fund transfer request for purpose of allowing for pruning to occur at Nagog Orchard, as well as some ancillary consulting services that may be needed for work up at Nagog Orchard. The select board had considered this at their last meeting when we had a joint meeting and presentation from the Nagog Orchard ad hoc working group. So the select board had voted to authorize reserve fund transfer, and we're here before the Finance Committee for the same request.
All right. Could you give the amount, please?
35,000.
Thank you. And the only questions I think I had in the last meeting, and that was more relative to, this is regardless of another tenant, the tenant that's existing, whatever, this is to get ahead of it so we don't lose another year of losing trees. So,
Right, so the ad hoc working group has consulted with many other local orchardists who are coming toward the orchard. We actually, also, Mr. Lake was able to facilitate somebody from UMass to come in and take a look at the orchard, and they identified that fields 4 and 5 are in really good condition. But one of the things that they stated that we need to do sooner rather than later is to prune the trees. In those 2 fields specifically. So we came up with a estimated price for each tree based on the consultant feedback. So it basically came out to like $12 to $14 per tree. And so we decided we have a 3-phase approach to addressing issues in the orchard. This is part of phase 1. And it's something that needs to be done immediately, needs to be done in the month of February. So that's why we have come forward with this request.
any discussion? Anyone online?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. And I understood Joe correctly. This is not just for pruning. There's for some consulting fees in there. If I understand that correct, do we have a breakdown of that, or how much is pruning and how much is consulting? Or am I off base here?
Sure. So we're using, for budgetary standpoint, about $15 per tree. There's about 2,000 trees up there, resulting in $30,000. So basically looking at around 5,000 in case we needed to retain someone else to assist us in any other activities that we may need for the orchard on a very limited basis. We understand that depending on how successful we are with an RFP, we may be able to hand this off. We also may not be, and we may need to have a more concerted effort in management of the orchard. And that time we may need some consulting services to help us, or we may need to come back for as part of annual town meeting.
Okay, thanks, Joe. And the $15 per tree came from where? Where did that estimate come from?
So as Cindy mentioned, we had been talking with a number of orchardists, and they gave us basically a range of about $7 to $12 a tree was reasonable amount. I bumped that up a little bit so that we made sure that depending on what we ran into, that we had enough of a budget.
So if there's overage, is that going to go towards consulting, or is that going to come back?
That would really end up coming back, but we also don't know, once we do the pruning, we may end up having to do some spraying as well, because we are trying to look after the orchard, and with the goal of having pick your own in the fall, there may be some work that we need to do if we don't have someone to take over those activities.
Makes sense. Okay, thanks, Joe.
Anyone else? Right, Finance Committee, I look for a motion to approve the reserve fund transfer for $35,000.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Get all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I have a roll call the hybrid. Mr. Chappney.
Yes.
All right. Mr. Rasmus.
Yes.
Right. It's unanimous. Thank you. All right. Do we have any public input? Fantastic. Member updates and anything that's significant related to.
Yeah, I mean, just one quick thing. I mean, first, now that the MMA is gone, hybrid, really need to sign up at that day and do a workshop talking about this happening. It's not trusted. Feel free to sign up. It's not too late.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, let's look at some previous minutes, I believe, from January 11th.
Yep.
Do we have any questions or corrections to the minutes from January 11th? Look for a motion to approve minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from January 11th, 2022.
Second.
and seconded, no further discussion. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Mr. Champion.
Aye. Yeah.
Mr. Rathman.
Aye.
Right, it's unanimous. Thank you, Marilyn. And with that, motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Been moved by Mr. Champion, and seconded. That's, oh, your turn. So moved and seconded, please signify by saying aye.
All right.
Mr. Champion.
Aye.
Mr. Rathman.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you. We'll see you next Tuesday.